Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me again today. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make old-fashioned beef gravy and noodles. So for this recipe, we are going to be using 2.5 pounds of beef chuck roast, half of a yellow onion, about 1 cup sliced, 5 to 6 garlic cloves, or about a tablespoon, half a tablespoon of thyme, half a tablespoon of whole peppercorns, 4 bay leaves, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, and a half a teaspoon of garlic pepper, 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 2 to 3 tablespoons of beef base or beef bouillon, 4 tablespoons of butter, and 1 package of frozen egg noodles. Alright you guys, so to get started, I just rinsed this meat off, so now I'm just patting it dry. You guys want to be sure that whenever you're searing meat, that you are letting it come to room temperature before searing it. It just works better if you add meat, like room temperature meat, to a hot pan rather than like really cold meat. And also you do not have to do this step if you don't want to. If because we're cooking this in the crock pot, you guys could just go right to the crock pot, just kind of throw everything in and turn it on and let it go. But if you do have time, this will improve the quality of your overall dish. So I'm just really generously seasoning one side of the meat here, and I do want you guys to keep in mind that I do use kosher salt, and so it has a less salty kind of flavor to it. So even though it looks like I'm using a lot of salt, it's not as much as if you were to add this much iodized salt to this meat, for example. So salt is always to your own taste and just kind of depending on what kind of salt you use. And then you can see my pan is really hot, so I just added some olive oil in. And I'm just getting the meat in there, and I'm using kind of a small pan today because I didn't cut this meat up. I just left it in one big chunk, so the small pan is actually going to help me to sear the meat. And then I'm just seasoning the other side. And again, if you guys are using iodized salt, make sure that you kind of adjust that to your taste. You know how much salt and stuff you guys like, and keep in mind that the beef base has salt in it, and depending on what kind of garlic pepper you use, some of them are very salty and some of them aren't salty at all. So that can make a big difference too. If you guys want to just kind of switch that to only garlic powder, then you can control your salt a little bit better there. So the onion, I'm just cutting it into slices and then cutting it in half. Garlic, I'm just going to kind of give these a rough chop. I'm not going to worry too much about these. And I have a bunch of really tiny cloves here, so that's why it looks like there's so many. But this was probably about 5 to 6 normal size cloves of garlic. And then I'm going to go ahead and flip this meat over. So you guys do want to give this a good 5 minutes to just sit there on that one side before you even try to flip it. And if it gives you any kind of resistance, just let it keep going. It'll let you know when it's ready to flip. So I'm just going to start adding stuff into my crock pot here. So I'm just throwing in all the onions, giving this meat a little place to sit. And you guys can see I have this flipped up on the side, and I am going to try to get all of the sides seared as well. This part can be a little bit tricky, and this is where the smaller pan comes in handy. Because it's so small, it's going to kind of, the sides are going to help me to kind of hold the meat up to get the sides of it seared. So, or if you guys have time, you can just sit there with your tongs and hold it up. So I'm just going to kind of move it onto the edge of the pan, and then it's just going to kind of hold that up for me there. Then I want to go ahead and get the other side done. So you can see there is a nice crust on that one side. That's what you guys want to see. And then there's that other side. And put that into my crock pot. I'm going to deglaze the pan with a couple cups of water. So I do want to get all of that flavor out of the pan and add that into my crock pot. Just be careful when you do this, because if you add in too much liquid, it could bubble over. So just kind of go a little bit slow at it. And then take your tongs or whatever you're using and just kind of lightly scrape the bottom of the pan just to get all of that flavor out of there. And then I'm using a beef base today, so I do want to go ahead and dissolve this in this water before I add it into my crock pot. If you're using a powdered bouillon, you might not have to do this step, but you definitely could. It's not going to hurt anything. And you can see how nice and dark and rich this water is becoming now. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm adding a tablespoon of Worcestershire, and I'm just going to put that right over the meat. Let that soak down in. Throwing in all of my garlic, and then I'm just going to put the bay leaves just kind of all around the pan, and then throw in the rest of those spices. And then I'm just going to put the 4 tablespoons of butter just right on the top of the meat there, and it's just going to kind of melt as it warms up. It'll melt down into the meat and give it a really good flavor. All right, and then I'm just pouring my liquid in, and I did add a little bit more water just to get the rest of that base out of the pan. Just throwing that in as well. And then you're going to go ahead and put your lid on this and cook it on low for 10 hours. And then after 10 hours, this is what it should look like. So you can see the meat is very tender. It's pulling apart pretty easily there. And it looks really good. It looks perfect. So if your meat pulls apart easily like this, then it's good to go. If it doesn't pull apart quite that easily, put the lid back on and let it cook for another hour or so. So I'm just going to get all of this meat out of here, and I'm going to set it aside so it can cool down so that I can shred it and separate some of that fat out of there. And there it is. And then you guys, I want to get this juice, and I just want to put it into this measuring cup. So this ended up being about 4 cups. And I'm doing this because I want to get some of the fat out of here. So you guys can see once you put it in this cup, it's really easy to kind of see where the fat is. So I'm just putting my spoon in and just kind of like lightly, gently pressing down. And then the fat just kind of runs into the spoon. And you guys, you don't have to do this step if you don't want to, but I just really like to get that fat out of there. It's not necessary. All right, you guys can see all these onions and stuff. I'm going to try to pull some of these onions out to put into the finished product. But for the most part, I kind of want to strain this. I want to get all those little peppercorns and everything out of this. You definitely don't want to bite into one of those. So I'm just straining it really quickly, making sure to get all of that liquid out of there. And then I'm going to add a cup of water, cold water, into my measuring cup. And I'm adding in about 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This is a mixture that is called a slurry, and what this is going to do is this is going to thicken up that liquid and turn this into a gravy for us. You guys make sure that you taste this before you kind of get this going. This liquid for me, it was very salty, so I did have to add in a little bit more water. So just add in water until you get to the taste that you want, until it's not quite as salty. And then I'm just going to kind of let this sit in my crock pot while I get my beef shredded. So again, this beef should just be really soft. It should be really simple to shred. I just kind of want to get it into a little more of a bite-sized piece, just break down some of these big pieces and also get some of the extra fat out of here. So I'm just going to go through and get all that done. And then when you're ready to make your gravy, put it in a sauce pot. And since we already added our cornstarch, we don't need to add anything into this now. As long as your salt is good, you should be good to go. So I just want to bring this liquid up to a boil, and then I'm going to go ahead and throw in my egg noodles. You guys want to wait to the very end to add these noodles because they could get very mushy if you were to just add these right into the crock pot. They would just be mush by the time you got to this point. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of let these cook here for probably about 5 minutes. Just break them up so they're not sticking together. And then you can see this is after 5 minutes, and these noodles are very absorbent, so they will just absorb a lot of that salt and a lot of that flavor in there. So I'm going to go ahead and add the meat back in. You guys can see how good it looks. And I did get some of those onions. I'm going to put those in there as well. And then I'm going to let this cook together for another probably about 15 minutes, and then it's going to be all done. Make sure you get all of that juice from that pan in there too. Anything that the meat has released, get all that in there. Just going to stir it together and just kind of let it do its thing. And that is how you guys make your old-fashioned beef and noodles. I hope you guys liked the video. Don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell, and I will see you guys in my next video.